So
just a minute. I'll share
in
my.
this kind of, okay, you can share it on the chat.
Yeah.
So again, let's go with the CIA tried first, then we jump toward our other things. One more thing here. So in CIA, like your C stands for confidentiality. Again, I'm using the short form for the confidentiality, CONF. So confidentiality means like the data we have should only be available to the authorized persons, right? And the authorized persons can only read the data. Right? No other can read the data. Those are the main part for the confidentiality. If I talk about the integrity, the main point of the integrity is like how you detect or how you prevent someone from modification. Like if there was a modification, how you detect the modification, how you can prevent others from modifying the data. That was the part with the integrity. The third thing we have is the availability. Availability, and short, like availability means the data we have should be confidential and should follow the integrity rules, right? But whenever we send any request for the data, or whenever we request for that information, it should be available all the time.
Yeah.
Right? That was a part of availability. We have one more thing other than this confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That was simple non-repudiation.
Non-repudiation. Okay.
Do you have any idea what is non-repudiation?
No.
Okay. So non-repudiation means the actions performed by you or actions happened on your machine. You can't deny for those actions. You can't deny for the actions happened on your side or performed by you. You can't deny for those actions. That was a part of non-repudiation. Let's take a simple example. Suppose, like, let's go with simple black money example. Let's मेरे पास कुछ रुपए थे, आप अभी स्विट्जरलैंड में बैठे हो, सपोज, तो मैंने वो रुपए को ट्रांसफर कर दिए, ठीक है। अब इन केस मेरे लेवल पे कोई फोरेंसिक इन्वेस्टिगेशन होने लगी, तो पुलिस वाले मेरे ऊपर केस कर दे कोई कि मैंने ब्लैक मनी कहीं बाहर जमा करके रखी है मेरी, ठीक है, तो मैं उन एक्शंस के लिए मना नहीं कर सकता कि मैंने वो रुपए आपको ट्रांसफर किए थे, बिकॉज मेरे पास प्रॉपर रिकॉर्ड्स होते हैं, कुछ डिजिटल फुटप्रिंट्स होते हैं। लाइक सिंपल एग्जांपल दूं कि मान लो अकाउंट स्टेटमेंट्स होगी, बैंक जो अमाउंट होगा बैंक के अंदर वो भी अपडेट हुआ होगा, तो कुछ डिजिटल फुटप्रिंट्स हैं, बिकॉज ऑफ दैट पार्ट यू कांट डिनाई फॉर द एक्शन जो आपने परफॉर्म किए या फिर जो आपकी साइड पे हुए हैं, अब उनके लिए मना नहीं कर सकते। और आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि आपको वो पैसे नहीं मिले, राइट? मैं ये नहीं कह सकता कि मैंने वो आपको नहीं भेजे, और आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि आपको पैसे कभी मिले ही नहीं। That was the part of non-repudiation. You can't deny for the actions happened on your side or performed by you. You can't deny for those. So, other than this, the simple confidentiality part for the CIA tried, let's just jump toward the different types of hacker first. So, like, if you know what are the different types of hacker?
No.
Just go here. So we have different types of hacker. Like, let's take a simple example. Okay. So the first one we have is, we generally call them black hat hacker.
Black hat hacker, yeah.
Black hat. The second we have is white hat.
Red
and
hat.
Before that, there is nothing like red hat.
Okay.
We have one more type of hacker. We call them gray hat.
Okay, a gray hat. Sorry.
Yeah, gray hat. The red term was used for the red team.
Okay.
Yeah, red teaming was there. So for the black hat hacker, generally, like when you are identifying the weakness, let's say, let me just explain a few things first before these types of hacker. एक simple चीज समझते हैं पहले. Let's go with like first 5 phases of hacking.
Okay.
Then you will better relate. Then you can better relate all different kinds of hacker. Right? So 5 phases of hacking start with the first one. Like let's say like information gathering was always your first phase of hacking. You have to collect as much information as possible, like for the open source portion, like kind of enumeration part and all different things. You have to identify all the information, how to target. So we're just discussing 5 phases of hacking, and the first phase was information gathering. Right. So the main point here was you have to collect as much information as possible about your target. Like if you're targeting a person, You need to know the family member's name, you need to know the mobile number, their email address, their favorite foods, their favorite locations, and all different things. Because when you're targeting a person, like let's say you want to hack his accounts for the Facebook or Gmails, right? You need to know the password. And for that, you can create any kind of word list. Like you can just go with like some random guesses. You can guess his password, like being a person. But we generally use as a password, our mobile number, a combination of mobile number, our date of birth, our name, our surname, a combination of these things. You can just try these things as the password for that email address. So you need to collect this kind of information about your target. It doesn't matter you are targeting a person, you are targeting a organization, you are targeting a website, right? Again, you have to collect information about your target. That was the basic first phase of hacking. After that, we have the second phase, we generally call it scanning. And in the scanning phase, what's your main point here? You need to identify the weakness just by analyzing the information collected in the first phase. What you do, you just analyze the information and you try to identify the weakness. So the main focus for the second phase was to identify the weakness. Right? After identifying the weakness, what's your third step? So your third step is like gaining access. Gain access. After identifying the weakness in some kind of system, in some kind of websites, right? You just create some kind of payload, you just create some kind of malicious scripts, you can say, and you want to execute them just to gain access for that machine, for that server, right? That was your third phase, when you gain access to the system or the machine. After gaining access, let's say you have to migrate your access, you have to maintain your access for like 5 or 10 days. And for the maintenance part, we generally use malware. So the fourth phase here, after gaining access, the fourth phase was to maintain your access. Right? And for maintenance purpose, we generally use malware. Like you can use any kind of like rats, you can just create any kind of backdoors out there. But the main point was you can use malwares for all the things. Like with the malware, you can just gain the access, you can maintain the access as well, right? But all the time for maintaining, we always use malwares. After that maintaining part, when your attack was complete, after completing your main objective, like if you want some data from the server, like if you want to dump some databases, if you want to, let's say, corrupt some data on the server side, whatever your main objective was, after completing your main objective, you need to clear all the digital footprints which a server creates for all the actions you perform on those machines. Like if I just click here, if I just open the paint, if I just open any application here, what my system will do, my system will create some kind of logs, create some kind of digital footprints out there, right? So after completing your actual intention, you have to clear all those footprints. So in the case, like there was some kind of, like if there was any forensic investigation happened on the victim side, then there was no place. So you can identify, so ताकि आपकी identity कभी reveal ना हो. So you can act like an anonymous person, right? Your identity will always be hidden. Just for that part, we always clear the tracks. So you can keep your identity always hidden, right? So the fifth phase was clear all the tracks. Clearing tracks, we usually call them. You can just call it tracks, you can just call it logs, you can just call it footprints again. All the things were same. You can just call it whatever you like. But the main point was clearing all the digital footprints on that system, right? So for any kind of hacker, like if you act as a black hat, if you act as a white hat, if you act as a gray hat hacker, these two phases, like the phase first, information gathering, and phase two, the scanning, were always common for all these three types of hacker out there, right? Again, after identifying the weakness, what's the most important part here? Was your intention, right? If you want to defame the organization, if you want to take advantage of that weakness, you act as a black hat hacker who take advantage of the weakness, right? If you are taking advantage of that weakness just to get some sensitive information, just to defame the organization, just to make any service unavailable. For these kind of things, just for the malicious intent, you can say that for, if you want to perform any kind of malicious activity on that system, right, then you act as a black hat hacker who has the malicious intents, right, or who generally take advantage for the weakness. But if you are, if you just identify the weakness and if you report it to the organization, like let's say you have a website like abc.com, right? Being a attacker, and I got a weakness in your website, I'm able to identify any weakness in your website. And if I'm reporting it to you, if I'm reporting that weakness to the actual owner of that website, then I act as a white hat hacker, which identify the weakness for the goodwill, you can say, right? So they never act as a malicious attacker. They all the times they act as a defender for the, what we call them, for the properties, you can say, like for if you have some properties, like if you have some assets like your website, your web servers, your simple network systems, and all different things. But they always act as a defender, you can say, because they identify the weakness and they just report them to the actual owner, right? We call them white hat hacker. But let's say you are just testing for different websites. Let me just go with multiple examples here. Let's say this week you are testing this website, let's say like amazon.com, right? After testing amazon.com, you identify some weakness here in the Amazon, and what you do, you just report them, right? You got a weakness and you have reported to them. That was the first thing. Second thing was, let's say after a month or after, let's say, a week, again you are testing but on a different platform this time. Let's go with any website. Let's go with like Facebook, right? Again, you got a weakness on the Facebook, but this time, instead of reporting that weakness to the Facebook, what do? You just take advantage for that weakness to get some like username, passwords, you get some sensitive information from the Facebook, right? Just to extract some sensitive information from the Facebook, you are just taking advantage of that weakness. At that time, you act as a black hat. When you take advantage, if you just write it here, take advantage of the weakness. At that time, you act as a black hat. But when you report the weakness to the actual owner, you act as a white hat. But again, the person here who tests both the website was same, right? Sometimes you act as a white hat hacker to report the weakness. Sometimes you act as a black hat to take advantage of that weakness. These kind of hackers were known as the gray hat hackers. Sometimes they act as the defender. Sometimes they act as an attacker, right? Just to harm some organization. Sometimes they act as a black hat hacker, sometimes they act as a white hat hacker. We call them gray hat. After that, we have other things as well. Like, let's go with the PT part first. So let's say, like I hire Oliver for the penetration testing part. Like Oliver has a organization who work for the penetration testing part. Oliver, let's say the organization name was like ABC Incorporation. Right. Who does the penetration testing part, who can perform the penetration testing part. And let's say in that organization, we have like 1,000 professionals for the penetration testing, right? And I'm the client for the Oliver. Let's say I have a product, you can say I have a website. Let's go with any website again. You can just go with Facebook, right? I want to test my platform, like is it secure or not, right? So what I will do, I'll contact Oliver to perform the penetration testing, to identify the weakness and just report all the weakness he got to me back, right? I'll just contact the Oliver for the penetration testing part. What Oliver will do, he will just send some 100 employees, 100 professionals to my organization. He sent 100 employees, 100 professionals to my organization for penetration testing part. Like 100 employees were sent by the Oliver, were sent by the ABC Incorporation to the Facebook.com for the platform testing, right? Out of those 100 professionals, let's say like 70 of them act as a black hat hacker. 70 of them act as a black hat hacker. What was their main intention out there, right? When you are when you are mainly focused on identifying the weakness, right? When you're mainly focused on identifying the weakness, we call them red hackers or red team part. Let's say you have a group of people who are more focused on identifying the weakness and then exploiting it, right? But the main point was identifying the weakness. These kind of people, these kind of professionals were known as the part of red team who were more focused on identifying the weakness. Let's say 70 of them, 70 of the professionals were focused on identifying the weakness in the Facebook.com platform, right? And 30 was still left. So what 30 will do? 30 will act as a defender, right? All the weakness which were identified by the red team, they deploy some kind of security patches, they deploy some kind of security updates, you can say, right? They they can deploy the security updates so that they can prevent other hackers, other attackers to again identify the same weakness and just take advantage of that weakness, right? So they act as a defender to patch, to fix all the weaknesses, all the vulnerabilities which were identified by the red team, right? So we call them the blue team part, which act as a defender to identify the weakness. We can say we call them blue team who apply the fixes, right? Who just patch the weakness for the client, you can say, right? So out of 100 professionals, 70 of them were working in the red team who were more focused on identifying the weakness. 30 of them, we call them the blue team because they were more focused on applying the fixes which were identified by the red team, right? So after this red team and blue team, let's say like we have other types of hackers as well, other than this black hat, white hat, and gray hat. We generally call them like the first thing we generally call them like the professionals who were new in the field of cybersecurity, like all of us. We generally call them script kiddies. So all the script kiddies were just new in the field of cybersecurity. They know how to use the tool, but they don't know what's actually happening behind that, what's actually happening in that system, how the tool was working. They don't have any idea, but they only know how to use the tool. All the times they get some script from the internet, they just download the script and just execute them. They don't know what the script was doing, how the script was working on the back end. They don't have any idea, but they know how to use those scripts. We call them script kiddies, right? Other than these script kiddies, we have one more types of hacker. We generally call them state sponsored, right? So in case of state sponsored hackers, let's say when you are funded when you are supported by the government for the hacks, for the defense part, right? When you hack for the government or when you perform some penetration testing for the government, we call them state sponsored hackers who does hacking part for the government. They have full support from the government, so they can just hack other countries as well. They can just hack other government parties, other countries for the national will, right? So all these kind of hackers who are sponsored, who are supported by the government, we call them state sponsored hackers, right? Other than this, we have few common terms which you should know in the field of cybersecurity, which we'll be using throughout the course. And they were just common terms again. So the first term here, which I'll be using all the times, that was the payload, right? So what is a payload? All the scripts, all the malicious code, you can say, which was written with the malicious intent. Any command which was written to perform any malicious action on that system. Like if you are deleting all the files from a folder, again, it's a malicious command, right? So all the malicious commands, all the malicious codes, we call them payloads. So payload is just a term, just a common term to generally used for the malicious codes. So you can say malicious scripts as well, right? Other than this payload, we have one more term that was a vulnerability. So vulnerability was nothing different, just the weakness. Like if you're able to identify any kind of weakness on that, let's say any server or any mobile device, any website, any system itself, like a Windows 10, Linux, any again, when you're able to identify any weakness or if there was any weakness, right? We know that weakness with the name vulnerability. For the weakness, we use the term vulnerability, right? You can say it's just a canonical name, it's just an alias for the weakness, right? After this payload and weakness, we have one more thing about that vulnerability part was for all the vulnerabilities, for all the weaknesses, right? Like if you have a weakness, again, you can't just simply call it a vulnerability because for the vulnerability part, there should be a weakness, and for that weakness, there should be security updates as well. Let's say I have a weakness in Windows 7, right? But I
Mm.
have the security fixes in Windows 8 and Windows 10 as well. I have the weakness in older version for that software for that OS part, but I have the security updates as well. At that time, I'll call it a vulnerability when you have the weakness and you have security updates as well, right? Other than this, we have one more term which we generally use. It's the 0 day. So 0 day is nothing different than vulnerability, but the only difference is again, it's a weakness, but for this kind of weakness, there was no security updates. Let's say I'm using Windows 10, the latest version for the Windows 10, the 20H2 part, right? But for this latest version of the Windows, if I'm able to identify any weakness which was never identified before, if I'm able to identify a new weakness for Windows 10, the latest version for the Windows, like for 0 day kind of weakness, we have the weakness, but we don't have any security updates, which was released from the Microsoft. Like in our example, I am able to identify some weakness. I got some weakness in Windows 10, the latest version for the Windows, right? Developers don't know about that weakness. Microsoft don't know about that weakness, and no one else around the globe knows about that weakness. I'm the only person who knows about that weakness. This was a newly discovered weakness. At that time, we call it a 0 day because we have the weakness, but we don't have any security updates, security fixes for that weakness, right? So let me just write it here. We have the weakness, but we don't have security updates, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Other than this, we have one more common term which is generally used is the exploit, right? Exploit was just a combination of the payload and the weakness. When you have the weakness, let's say I have a weakness for Windows 7, right? And just to take advantage for that weakness, I have the pre-written script as well. Combination of the script and the weakness, we call it a exploit. Or when you just take advantage of that weakness, we generally call it a exploit, right?
Mm.
Other than this exploit, we have few more common terms as well. Like the first thing was the deep web. And before deep web, let's just go with some other common terms. Let's just go with like first was your surface web. Other than surface web, we have the deep web part, and at last we have the dark web part. So let's start with the surface web first. So all the information which is publicly available, like when you just perform a simple Google search, all the pages which were listed out, they were the part of the surface web. Let's say I can just view your profile. I can just view your Facebook profile through a simple Google search or through a simple search on the Facebook, right? right? I can view your profile. That was the part of surface web. But just to view your message, if I want to see your messages, right, I have to authenticate myself on the Facebook with the username and password. When I have to authenticate for the information, that was the part of deep web. Again,
Mm.
the public information is the part of surface web, right? And when you need to authenticate yourself, like info available only after authentication is the part of your deep web. Again, for deep web, you have to authenticate yourself. But at last, we have one more term, we call it the dark web. Dark web is nothing different than the surface web or the deep web part. The only point is to access all the websites which were hosted in the dark web host. They use a protocol, they use a service. We call it onion routing. The only point here is they use a protocol, they use a service, we call it onion routing, right? Which performs some level of encapsulation and encryption over your request and responses. Let's say I need to draw some pictures here. So I'm opening one more paint. Let's say this was your user, right? Who want to access Google at, let's say here, right? We just name them. This one is user here, and this one was, let's say, google.com, right? My user want to access google.com. So if he was not using the onion protocol, he can just send a request to Google and he can just receive some responses from the Google. This was the normal situation, right? In normal scenarios, this happens. If you are using the onion routing, at that time, what happens? Instead of directly sending requests and responses to this google.com, you just create a proper path. Like let's say, instead of sending directly request to this google.com, what I will do, I'll just use multiple machines just to pass my traffic. So first I will do, I'll just create a request from the user's machine and send it to the first machine. Let's say this one, right? This machine was known as the entry guard, right? First, I'll send the request to this entry guard for the M1 machine. Let me just write the name here. Let's just go with M1, right? After sending request to M1, what M1 will do, M1 will send that request to this M2 machine. Again, we call it with a name. We generally use the intermediate node. We use the name intermediate node. So we can just name them first. So that was M1. This is M2. Let's say this was M3. This one is M4, M5 here, and let's say this one is M6, right? So my user initiate a request, and that request will be first sent to this M1 machine, which is generally called the entry guard, right? Entry guard will send that request to the M2 machine, which is generally called intermediate node again. Then M2 will forward that request to M3, which again, which is known as the intermediate node again. After M3, it goes to M4. From M4, it goes to M5. From M5, it goes to M6. And at the last, my Google will receive that request from the M6. So what Google will feel? Like the request was initiated, the request was originated from that M6 machine, right? And for
Mm.
all these transmission, we perform some level of encapsulation as well. Let's say this was your actual request. This box contain your request. You just name it as RRR, right? RQ कर लेते हैं. Let's say this box contain my actual request, through which I'm just trying to access google.com, right? And for the onion routing, we generally encapsulate the request, or you can say with the data or with that request, what I will do, I'll just pack that request in one more request. I just create a separate request for that. I'll perform this level of encapsulation, like you are just packing a box inside a box, right? When you pack a box inside that box, and again you just perform the same steps 5 or 6 times, right? So let's say here we send a request to the M1, right? When the request goes to M1, what M1 will do? M1 will just encapsulate it with its as its own request, right? Or when the request goes to M2, again what M2 will do? M2 will again perform one more level of encapsulation out there, right? This one is just an encapsulation. They really call it encapsulation. When you just pack the data, when you just pack the request inside another request, when you just pack the box inside another box, we just call it encapsulation. So for the onion routing, let me just erase it. Yeah. So for onion routing, the steps were somewhat different here. Let me clear it. Okay. So for onion routing, let me clear this one as well. Okay. So when a user initiate a request, what he will do? He will first create a request, right? And then encapsulate them, encapsulate that request as per the connection. Like we have the 6 machines here, M1, M2, M3, 4, 5, and 6, right? Then user will encapsulate that request into 6 levels. Like this one is my actual request for the M1, then the M2, then the M3 level, then again the M4 part, then again the M5 thing, and at last the M6 thing. Okay. So when the request goes to the M1, what M1 will do, M1 will unwrap, or you can say, and M1 will open the box, which was the outermost box. Or you can say M1 will just remove the outermost layer of encapsulation. You can say M1 will remove this layer of encapsulation, right? And when the request was passed to the M2, M2 will again remove one more level of encapsulation from there. Same was for by the M3, we'll remove one more level of encapsulation, then the part of M4, then the part of M5. We forgot one more, we forgot one layer for encapsulation, right? And for the M6, when the request was sent to the M6, what M6 will get? This last box, so we can say this actual request, which was originated from the user. Then my M6 will send that request, this actual request to the google.com, right? The same step was followed for the response as well. Again, your response will be encapsulated into multiple levels for multiple machines for M6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Again, it will follow the 6th level of encapsulation. With encapsulation, we use one more thing here, that was the encryption part, right? So encryption was there in the onion routing, and encapsulation was there, right? So because of that encryption, which was performed on that data, and because of that encapsulation, just to make the data more secure, you can say, that's the main part why the onion routing or why the dark web, we generally call them, is more secure. Or you can say that main point why hackers, why the website's owners, right? They were not identified easily. They can act as an anonymous person. That's the main part because of the encapsulation. Through the encapsulation, they can just hide their identity, right? Because my request was passed through multiple machines, as in this example here, right? So in onion routing, we always use the encapsulation here. We always use encryption here, and because of that, it's more secure, you can say. And all the websites in the dark web, they generally contain some extension, like they were not like google.com, facebook.com,
govindia.in.usa.gov, they don't contain these kind of domains, right? What they have is they use some hash values as their domain name, like this one. This kind of thing, they use this kind of numbers. We generally call them hash values with extension .onion, right? Because of that onion part, the request will always use the encryption part. They always follow the encapsulation as well, and they can only be accessed through some special softwares, you can say, like Tor is one of them, right? So you can just only use Tor like softwares just to access this kind of website, this kind of services which follow the onion routing, right? Because only these kind of softwares can perform that level of encapsulation. They were specially designed softwares, right? So other than this deep web, dark web part or the surface web part, other than this, we have few common attacks which you should know. Like the first thing was simple MITM. Is the first general threat for all different kind of things was the MITM. That stands for man in the middle attack. So MITM attack. So in case of MITM, all the traffic was passed through through a attacker's machine. Let's say, let me just clear this picture. Let's say here we have your user, right? And here we have your server. You just name them. This one is your user, and this one was your, let's say, google.com. Right. So in case of MITM, let's understand before MITM, let's understand simple situations, simple scenarios. In normal scenarios, your user send a request to google.com, and for that request, Google send a response to that user, right? But in case of MITM attack, all the traffic was passed through a different machine, which was generally, you can say, controlled by the attacker, right? So you can say your request will be sent to this attacker's machine, then to the google.com, and same procedure was followed by the, also the same path was followed by the response. So response from google.com will first goes to the attacker's machine here, and then it goes to the victim's machine here, right? So here, like this one, this attacker, in between the connection, attacker can easily modify, attacker can modify the data. He can just analyze the data. This kind of scenario where an attacker have the traffic, or you can say all the traffic which was originated from the user's machine or the actual server was passed through the attacker's machine. We call it the MITM attack, man in the middle attack, right? And the attacker was here in between the connection, you can say. So generally we call the man, the attacker in the middle of the actual connection, right? We generally call it MITM, man in the middle. Other than this MITM, we have one more attack. We generally call them DOS. Like in case of DOS attack, let's say, let me just make the picture more clear. Okay, let me just rename that machine from user to attacker. And let's say we have the user here. Name it as user. Okay, let's say Google offers some services. Google offers some search engine services, you can say, right? And being an attacker, if I'm able to disturb that service, or if I'm able to make that service unavailable to all the users around the globe, or you can say around, or you can say in a single area, you can say, like if I'm able to make that service unavailable to the actual users, this kind of attacks were known as the DOS attacks. When you can use a single machine, when you can use multiple machine, again, that's a different thing. But when you are just sending some packets, just by sending some commands, just by sending some packets to the attacker's machine, right? When you can disturb the actual service which was offered by that server, offered by that, you can say, organization, when you can disturb that service, we generally call it DOS attack, which stands for, again, denial of service. Other than those, like the other attacks we generally use is a password based attack. You can just go with some brute force attacks just to crack the password. Like let's say I know the username for the Gmail. Like let's say my Gmail ID was abc@gmail.com. I don't know the password, right? So being a attacker, what I can do, I can just give it a try for different password. Let's say I can use my mobile number as a password. So I'll try with mobile number. I can use my date of birth as a password. So I will try for the date of birth. I'll try for the my name. I'll try for my surname. I try for my college name, my school name, my location, my address, my family member's name, my friend's name, whatever there was. But you are just giving it a try for different words, you can say. That kind of attack was known as the brute force, where you are just trying with different words to crack the password. We call it the brute force attack, right? Other than this, we have few other common terms which you can generally use, like unauthorized access is again one more term. So in case of unauthorized access, like you don't have permission to access any location, and again, I'm talking about the physical location. You don't have access, you don't have permission to visit any kind of like sensitive area like server rooms and all different kind of locations or different kind of rooms you can say, right? Again, you don't have permissions to access any page. You don't have permission to access other users' messages, other users' email addresses, or you can say when you don't have permission to access any folders as well, right? When you're able to attack on these kind of access level part, so when you're able to crack that permission part, we generally call them unauthorized access. When the resources which was restricted from the access for you, when you don't have permission for that resources, but somehow you're able to access that resource. These kind of attacks were known as unauthorized access attacks. Again, so you can just follow the same thing for the physical security part as well. You can just relate these things for the physical security. When you have access to any sensitive locations, sensitive places, you can say, right? But you are not authorized to visit those places. Other than this, like the main point for most of the attack was like if when you are not using any kind of firewalls, when you are not using any kind of antiviruses. Again, I'm talking about the paid antiviruses, not about the free versions. When you are not using any actual activated antiviruses or when you are not like using some kind of firewalls on the server level, right? That kind of things were the main reasons for most of the attacks. Or like when you are using some outdated softwares as well, which we generally use in our normal days. Like we always use some outdated software like for MS Office, we generally use like we always use MS Office 2007. Like when we don't want to purchase the Office 365, then what we generally do, we will start looking for the cracked version for 365, or we just download the older version like 2007, right? We use the older version for those softwares. Again, the unpatched or the outdated software, outdated operating system, one more, but again one more reason why this kind of attacks were possible. Then again, 0 days were again a weakness of the vulnerability part. Other than this, like 5 phases were done, you can say, like information threats were done from my side, like few things, few attacks were done from my side, teams were done, PD part was done, different types of hackers was done, CIA tried, no reputation, and all different things, right? Like being an organization, like let's say example of this example here at the Oliver and the Facebook.com, like being a client, like I have a website, facebook.com, right? I want to test my platform, but from the professional, I contact Oliver or I contact the ABC Incorporation, let's say, but how I will trust them? Like they were a secure service provider, you can say, or they will just test my platform in a secure manner. How I will trust them? For the trust factors, we generally use some kind of standards. We generally have some standards for different things here. Like let's say I think we all use Paytms and all different kind of payment gateways, right? For all the payment gateways which deal with like let's say your payment cards, most of the payment gateways deal with your debit card, credit card, and all different kind of cards as well, right? So
Mm.
when you want to check or when you want to like validate like the platform was secure or not, then you can just go with these things. So for the Paytm, if I just go with the website here, I just go with Paytm here, and if I scroll down, maybe, yeah, you can see. So being a client or being a, let's say, what do you call it, being a payment gateway service provider, if I want to process some kind of card data like Visa, Mastercard, RuPay, SafeKey, Discovery, and all different kind of data cards, right? All different kind of money cards, you can say. When I want to process the data for these kind of cards, I need to be compliant with the PCI DSS. PCI DSS again is just a set of rules, is just a standard, right? Which contains some rules like how you can process the data in a secure manner, how you can store the data, with whom the data should be shared, right? How to validate the data again. These kind of rules were specified in the PCI DSS, which always deal with the payment cards. So again, PCI DSS stands for the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. As the name suggests, all the PCI DSS set of rules, they only deal with the payment cards, right? Like your debit card and credit card, how the data should be processed, stored, shared, and all different things. Transmission part as well, right? So this kind of standards contain some rules how your data should be processed, stored, and shared in a secure manner. Again, PCI DSS is for the payment cards, and for the health information kind of thing, we generally use HIPAA. Again, that stands for Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. So health, or we can say the HIPAA deals with your health information, like what was your sugar level, what was your blood pressure, you have any kind of disease or not, what was your eyesight, and all different kind of health information was securely stored and securely shared with other hospitals, you can say, other medical stores, you can say, right? These kind of data should be securely stored and securely shared, securely processed as well. And for that, we have some set of rules. And that set of rules or that standard was known as the HIPAA, HIPAA. That again stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, right? Other than this, we have one more standard which is generally used, which you generally see as well. That was the ISO 27000. Again, it's a complete set of family, you can say. It's a complete set of standards. If I just go with the series, you can see for 27,000 set of standards here, we have different set of standards for different things, like code of practice was there, information security risk management part was there, again, guidance, guidelines was there, information security governance was there, network security part, application security part, information security incident management part was there. Again, for 27,000, we have different set of we have different standard for the different things, like how you can develop an application in a secure manner, how you can secure your network, how to test those networks, you have different things with 27,000 family. Again, with this kind of standard, with this kind of certification, you prove your security part. All the tools which we will be using for the CEH, you can say, what comes pre-installed in the Kali Linux. You don't have to install all the tools one by one. You don't have to fulfill the dependencies. Right? Just to avoid the installation part and just to avoid the dependency issues, we just download the Kali Linux, which contain all the tools. Not all, most of the tools which we will be using for the CEH. Right? So you can just download Kali Linux here from the official repository like kali.org. You can just go with the download page here, and you can download the installer. Again, it's a like 4 GB file. You can just download it, and it's an ISO file. Other than this Kali Linux, you need to download two other operating systems here. So the first thing was your Windows 10. Again, you can use Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10. You can just again use any Windows operating system out there. But I suggest you to download the Windows 10, again the latest version. So if you are using the Windows as your main operating system like me, I'm using Windows here as my main operating system in my machine. So if you're using the Windows in your main machine, this will not prompt you to download the Windows 10. But if you are using the Mac OS, if you are using the Linux in your main machine, and you search here to download the Windows 10. This will automatically take you to the download option. But here we have option for the tool only. We don't have the option to download the ISO file for Windows 10, right? But if you want to if you want to download the ISO file, what you can do? You can just download a small software like Rufus, which I generally use to create a bootable pen drive. You can just download this software, download this Rufus software from the official website, rufus.ie. And again, it's a small application. You can like 1.1 MB application. You can just download the latest version 3.13. And after downloading part, you can just directly execute it here. It will not prompt you for the installation part. Again, it's a small executable file. So when you just download and execute the application, this was the basic interface for the Rufus. And on that select button, we have one more option for the drag down here, drop down here, and that was for the downloading option. So just select this download option and click on this button. This will prompt you like for which version you want to download for Windows 10. So I'll be downloading Windows 10 here. You can download Windows 8.1 or Windows 10. Only two options were available here because Microsoft only offers the only offers these two versions nowadays. So you can download Windows 8.1 and Windows 10 here. So again, just go with continue. You can just select all the release, like which release you want to download. Again, I'm going with the latest one. Again, continue. Edition, I'm going with the Home or Pro. Continue again. And the language. So I'm going with English International. If you want to use some other languages as well, you can just choose any default language in which you are comfortable. So I'm going with default English International, continue, and the architecture part. So I'll be going with x86, not x86, x64. Right? Again, you can download the file from the browsers, and you can just download the file in this Rufus app software as well. Again, when you click on this download button, it will prompt you for the location where you want to save your file. So again, you can just save the file anywhere. It's again your choice. When you click on the save button, it will start the downloading. When you go with the logs, just to verify from where the application was downloading, and when you just go with this logs here, you can see like downloading from https://software download.microsoft.com, right? And if you just copy this link and paste it on your browser, again it will start downloading because we were just downloading this application. We were just downloading the Windows and ISO file from the official repository of the Microsoft. So you can just trust this application and you can just download Windows 10 from here. So I'm not downloading it because I have the ISO file. I already have the thing. So I'm just cancel the downloading part. Other than this Windows 10, we need to download one more application here, one more not application. We need to download one more OS part here, one more vulnerable machine you can say, and for that you can just jump toward the Vuln Hub. Right, all the machines, you can say all the vulnerable machines. But here you can just download any vulnerable machine. But personally, I suggest you guys to download the Metasploitable first because Metasploitable contain like vulnerabilities for both the things for networking as well and for your web part as well. So you can just test for networking part, you can just test for website part as well. Right? So you don't have to download you don't have to download separate machines for networking vulnerabilities and for web vulnerabilities. This single file contains vulnerabilities for both. You can just go with this Metasploitable version 2 and you can just download it from this link again. So you can just use these mirrors. You can just use the torrent if you are using torrent out there. But I'm not using torrent or I'm not using any kind of link to download it again because I already have the file, right? But when you download this application, when you download from this link, this will give you a zipped file. This will give you a zipped file for the Metasploitable. Let me just check. Do I have that same file? Nope, it's not here. Let's just check on the downloads. Accounts, tools, part, presentation, all those things were there, but no, I don't have the zipped file. But when you just download the zipped file and when you extract it, you get these folders. So when you just extract the zip file, you get this two other file in that zip folder, right? After extraction, you get these folders, you get these files. So after downloading all these things, you need to download one more software just to use all these Windows, all these Kalis, and all the critical parts. So you can use VMware for the practical part, or you can use VirtualBox. Personally, I'm using the VMware. I like VMware other than this VirtualBox. So you can just stick to VMware, or you can just stick to VirtualBox if you are comfortable with VirtualBox as well. Otherwise, you can just download the VMware for the Workstation Pro part. Again, you can just download it for Windows. You can just download it from for Linux as well. After downloading, you can just install it from like next and all next things. After installation, it will prompt you for the key, right? Because the Workstation Pro is a paid software, right? So you need the keys for the Workstation Pro. So you can just search on the Google for VMware Workstation Pro key, right? You can just search on the Google simply, and it will take you to the GitHub repository, or you can just go on this website APPNEE. You can just go here again. You can just go on this GitHub repository as well. This contains some key files, not key files, key values, you can say. You can use any of the keys, because again, for the VMware Workstation Pro, the keys were hard coded, right? So you can just use any key out there. And after installing VMware and the after activation part, this will prompt you for the reboot. And after reboot, this will give you the interface. This was the basic interface for the VMware Workstation Pro, right? So after installation, you can just go with this like the simple button here to create new virtual machines, because we need to install our Windows 10 machine here, and we need to install our Kali Linux machine here, right? So you can just go with create a new virtual machine. Just go with the default option, typical recommended again. Just go with this default and next. Here you have to browse for the ISO file which you have downloaded for Kali Linux or for the Windows. So you can just browse for the file, and for Kali Linux, this one is the latest version 21.1. Just browse for the file, select it, and go with the next option. Again, I know Kali Linux was a Debian. Kali was a Linux-based operating system, and it was a Debian distribution, right? So you can just go with Ubuntu. Again, it works for Ubuntu as well. So you can just go with Debian 10x64, right? So again, you can just go with the version. You can just go with the operating system. Then next, here you have to just name your file. You have to name your virtual machine. So I'll just rename it. I just name it with a name like, let's say, new Kali machine, right? After naming the machine, what you have to do, just change the default location from this C partition, right? You have to store this. You have to store all the files in a separate partition. Don't store them in a default location. Don't store them, right? Just browse for the location where you want to store them. I'm storing it in the D drive VMware folder, and just create a new folder with the name new Kali Linux, right? I'll be storing all the files for my machine in this directory D VMware, and inside that folder new Kali Linux, right? Then go with the next again. How much disk space? How much you can say? Here you're just creating a virtual disk for that machine. So like what was the maximum capacity you want to allocate for that virtual machine, virtual drive you can say. So here I'm just going with the 50 GB space for that virtual drive, and just go with the next. After that, we have the option, we have the memory part. If you want to increase the memory, if you want to just decrease the memory, again, depending on your configuration for that system, you can just increase or decrease the memory. Otherwise, you can just go with the default configurations here, and just click on the finish part. When you click on the finish button, this will take you here, and here you just have to power on that machine for the installation. You just power on that machine, and this was the installation part where you have to install the Kali Linux, right? So for installation, we have two options here. First one is graphical installation. where you can control the options, where you can just choose the options through your mouse as well, and you can use your keyboard as well. In the graphical installation, you can control the options with your mouse as well, right? But if you just go with simple basic installation or the standard installation part, you have to control the options through your keyboard. You can't use your mouse, right? So right now I'm just going with basic standard installation part. So just press enter here and it will start the installation for the Kali Linux. So here you can just choose your default language. I'm going with my default English, country as India, and keyboard as again default American English. So it will configure some services for you like DHCP service if you get IP address. So while installation part, we need to download some files. We need to download some tools you can say. And for that we need the DHCP service. We need a IP so we can communicate inside that network or outside that network as well, right? It will configure the network and then prompt you for the file systems. Okay. So here was the default thing for the host name again. You can just go with the default for the host name. After default, after the host name part, you have to go with the domain name. If you are inside the domain and you are installing that machine, if you are installing Kali Linux in your main machine and you are inside a domain, then you have to enter your domain name. But right now I am just inside the VMware and I'm not using any kind of domain out there. So I'll just leave it blank. I'll just go with default or leave it blank you can say and just press enter again. So you have to create a new user. Here you can use any name other than the root because root was the default user in the Kali Linux or in any Linux distribution. Root was a default user. Right? We already have a user with the name root, so you can't create one more user with the name root. So you have to choose different name, right? So for right now, I'm just going with the default. Like you can just use Kali here. Again, username as Kali. Again, password for this. I'm using Kali as same as username you can say, and just enter the username and password and just press enter. After this basic configuration, this will prompt you for the partitioning this, right? If you are using a drive which has different partition, let's say, like if you are using Windows and you are just switching from Windows to Kali Linux, right? So in Windows, you were using like local drive C, local drive D, and local drive E. You have multiple partition in Windows. When you are using Windows, you have multiple partition, and your main OS was installed in local drive C, but in local drive D and E, you have some data, right? At that time, what you will do, you can just only format the local drive C, but you can't format the local drive D and E, right? Or you can say you just want to install the OS in the local drive C partition, right? At that time you can just go with the manual just to see a list of all the partitions created in our hard drive, and you can just browse for this different local drives. Just okay, let's say like you want to install this Kali Linux in local drive C, local drive D, and local drive E. You can just browse for these things. Otherwise, when you are installing in the main, when you are installing this Kali Linux in your VMware, at that time you can just go with the entire disk because we have a separate virtualized disk out there. I have already created a separate virtualized disk for 50 GB space, right? So I can use the entire 50 GB virtualized disk. We don't have any separate partition in that 50 GB, right? So I can use the entire one. And this was the name to my virtual disk. Again, I'm just going with this one. So here we have the option for the partitioning. Like if you want to create some partitions in that virtual disk or not. So I'm not creating any kind of partitions here. I'm storing all the files in a single partition. Like I'll be storing the file for the user. I'll be storing the file for the system in a single partition. Let's select local drive C, right? The same thing was here. I'm storing all the files in single partition. You just press enter again. Yes, I want to make the changes and yes. So in Kali Linux, it will first install the base system. It will first install the CLI version, you can say, right? So first of all, the base system, or you can say the CLI version for the Kali Linux, Then it will prompt you for the GUI version, so for the tools, like how much tools you can say you can support with meta package, for the tools you want to install in your machine, and which desktop environment you want to install in your machine, right? So after installing base, this will prompt you for the desktop environment and tools. So it will take around 1 or 2 minutes. Again, it depends on the configuration for the system. If you have a strong system, it will take around like 1 minute. Otherwise, it could take around 5 minutes as well. So after base installation, just wait a minute. This will prompt me for the desktop environment and all the different things. All right. So after downloading the base system, we need to select the desktop environment, or you can select themes, right? Kali have different themes, you can say. The desktop environment was just like this theme. We have multiple, like say, the user interface, right? We have different user interface for the Kali, and the default one which Kali use is the XFCE because it's a lightweight environment, you can say. But personally, I don't like the XFCE. I like Genome more than XFCE because like Genome has some more extensions. I can just configure Genome easily other than the XFCE. Right, we have a easy setting options, we have easy menu options in the Genome. That's why I generally like Genome other than this XFCE or KDE Plasma. But again, you can just give it a try. You can just try XFCE, you can try Genome, you can try KDE Plasma as well. Again, it's your choice which environment you want to try here. After that part, we have the tools option. Like you want to download the top 10, you want to download the default meta package, or you want to download the large meta package as well, right? So if you want to install all the meta packages, you can just select them with the space bar, and then you can just go with the continue options here, right? It will install the desktop environment and tools for you. It could take around like 5, 10, or up to 13 minutes as well to install install all the tools and desktop environment for you. In the meantime, let's install the Windows 10, right? And again, for Windows 10, you can just go with the home, create a new virtual machine, or in the file menu, we have an option to create a new virtual machine, right? So just go with the new virtual machine options. Again, go with the next, browse for the ISO file, and for Windows 10, this one is the latest one, like Windows 10 20H2. So just go with next again. This one was asking for the Windows 10 key. So you can just search here for Windows 10 key. Just search here for Windows 10 key. And again, you can use any key out there. You can just copy the first one. Let's copy this one. It's the professional one. And you can just paste it. Right. After that, you can change the username. Again, it's your choice. I'm going with Windows 10 Pro. Next, you can just change the name. Let's go with Windows 10. Or let's go with like 10 Windows. Right. You can change the default location. Again, I'm storing all my files for this VM machine inside this folder. After that, just go with next again. Default storage was 60 GB for the Windows 10. You can just again decrease or increase. It's again your choice. I'm going with 50 GB out there. Just go with next. Then you can just upgrade the memory and all different things. For that, you have to just go with the customized hardware. So you can just double click here, right? Otherwise, just go with the customized hardware, and you can just upgrade or degrade your RAM. You can just scale up or scale down it, right? Again, it's your choice how much RAM you want to allocate to this machine. Right now, I'm just going with 4 GB of RAM and just go with finish. It will automatically power on the machine and automatically install it because I'm using Windows 10, right? It will automatically pick some configuration from my main host machine and configure my VMware machine according to the same configurations, right? So we don't have to do anything while installing Windows 10. It will automatically power on and install the machine for me. Right. So my Kali Linux was 40% installed. The Windows 10 was 2% installed, you can say. But on the same time, you can do one more thing. Instead of, so we have downloaded one more file if you remember, like for Windows, sorry, Metasploitable version 2, right? I have downloaded the zipped file and I have extracted inside this folder here with the name Metasploitable version 2. And after extraction, I got this file, right? So all you have to do is, you don't have to install the Metasploitable machine. So all you have to do is just go with this option, go with the scan virtual machine. Let me just show you. Before that, I have to remove my Metasploitable machine here. So just go with remove. Okay. So after downloading and extracting Metasploitable part, you can just go with like files, scan for virtual machine, just browse the folder where you have extracted the folder, where you have extracted the Metasploitable machine. So I have all the files for my machine inside this folder. Local ID, VMware, Metasploitable 2 hyphen Linux. Right? All my files were inside this single folder. Just go with OK, go with next, and I got my file, I got my machine here. Just go with finish option, and this will show you the machine on the left hand side, on the left hand tab, you can say. So when you click on this machine, you don't have to install it. It will automatically configure itself because it's a pre-configured file. You don't have to install it all the time. Just give me 1 minute. Your browser, this PC, B, VMware. Okay, next, finish, and yeah. Just because I'm using multiple tabs for the VMware, sometimes it gives you the error for the ownership, right? So you need to close one tab. Only then you can just access the other files which were opened in that tab. So you can just, when you just turn on this Metasploiter machine, just power on the machine. You don't have to do anything. It will automatically configure and it will automatically start the machine for you, right? Again, it's a vulnerable machine. So Windows 10 was prompting for the restart. It will restart multiple times, like 2 or 3 maybe. So after installing all the tools and the desktop environment, it will prompt you to install the grub bootloader, right? Because we all know just to boot our operating system, we need a kind of bootloader. Windows has its own bootloader, so we don't need to install other bootloaders. But for the Kali Linux and the Debian operating system, most of them they use the grub bootloader, and we need to install it separately. So just go with the yes that I want to install the bootloader. You have to specify in which partition you want you have your operating system. You have to specify. Right? If you have multiple partitions in your hard drive, then you get a list of all the partitions. But right now, I have just stored all the files in a single partition. So I have a single partition named /cv/sp8 because I have a single partition, right? So all you have to do is just browse for the partition in which you have your operating system and just press enter again. Install the bootloader and start the machine for you. So it could take around like 2 or 3 minutes to complete, and it will prompt you for the restart. wait for a minute. It will automatically prompt you for the video.
I couldn't hear you.
Sorry,
I couldn't hear you. It's so disturbance, so much disturbance up there.
I don't think the disturbance was on my side because I'm in full
Yeah, I
volume.
think it's with Olivia.
Your volume is so low.
And is it okay now?
Your volume is low.
And what about now? Is it fine?
Yeah, much better.
Oh, good then. So after installing the grub bootloader, you have to just continue because it will automatically restart the machine and boot up the Kali Linux, right? So just wait for a minute and it will prompt you for the start. On the other hand, my Windows 10 was successfully installed automatically. And let me just, yeah, Windows 10 was successfully installed. All the VMware tools were installed and it's completely fine, right? I can just shut down my machine and Metasploit machine was still running. I don't need to install it because it's a pre-configured file. All you have to do is just browse for that machine and that's all, right? I can power up this machine as well. And on the for the Kali Linux, you need to log in here with the credentials you have specified while installation. Just go with the credentials here. So this is the basic desktop environment for the Kali Genome environment version. So I'll be configuring my Kali Linux first. You can just configure it as per your convenience. So I'm making some modifications here. First one is the desktop wallpaper. Again, you can just choose any wallpaper, right? After that, just change the dock settings. I use the dock on the right hand side and just use a smaller size icons and show on all monitors, use launcher card, calculate workspace on monitor, behavior, workspace, toolbar, this works. And that's all. Other than this, you can use some extensions as well, which will be very helpful while using Kali Linux. So in general, in Windows machine, I use this clipboard to get a list of all the copies, right? And same, you can do the same thing in Kali Linux, but for that, you need to install the clipboard first. You need to install the clipboard viewer first. And to install this kind of thing, you can just go with the extensions or you can just search on the Firefox. You just open the Firefox and go on the add-ons here and search here for Genome, right? So inside this Genome, you can just install this Genome Self Integrator, browse it, add to Firefox. Yes. After installation, you can just click on this extension button here and this will take you to the actual website for the extension.genome.org. Here you can search for all the extensions which are available on the genome, right? So I'm using this one clipboard first, and you can just go with clipboard integrator. And all you have to for installation, all you have to do is just power on this button and just go with this install option here. And it will automatically install the clipboard extension for you. And here you can see on the top right, I got my clipboard. So whatever I will copy would be listed out there, right? If I just copy multiple things just to show you, I have a list of all the things I have copied, right? You can just go with the settings to increase the content length for the copy clipboard size, right? So maximum was 200 again. You can just go with 200 max to max, and you can just go with these basic things. And I want both the icons and the content here, right? You can again configure the extension as per your convenience. Other than this, you need few other things to be configured, like for the terminal which you'll be using throughout the course or you will be using all the times. You need to configure the shortcuts here for the preferences part. Go with the shortcuts. Here I'm modifying these options here. So I'll be using Control T for the new tab. Again, you can just go with the default, or you can just check them as per your convenience. I like these shortcuts. So I'm just configuring these. I'm using Control C for the copy and Control V for the paste. Right. Other than this, for zoom in, I'm using Control plus, zoom out Control minus, find Control F, and for switching, I'll be using Alt and the left, Alt and the right for the next. And that's all. Other than this, you can just go to the font options and you can just increase the font size. Again, you can just go with these other things as well, right? So these are few basic configurations which you can perform, which you can do. And the main point here was you should be familiar with the basic Linux command, right? So you can just, if I type ls, you should know the basic functionality of this kind of Linux command. And for this, for those commands, you can just search on the Google for like basic. So let's go with 30 basic commands, basic 30 Linux commands. You just go with this link, hostinger.in. Again, I'm sharing this link on the chat. So you can just copy that link and use it for the future reference. Other than these basic few commands, you can just go with other things as well. Like you need to know. Okay. So you need to know few other things like all the services, right? So you can just go with like 20 common services here, right here, like for 20 common services. For these services, 20 common network services. Again, you can just go with these common services as well. Like, yeah, you can just go with these services. Again, all you have to do is just search on the Google for these things, right? So you can just go through these things first, and then in the next session tomorrow, we will start with the footprinting part or the first phase of hacking, information gathering.